All right. In the interest of time, and this is only should be scheduled for 30 minutes. We'll go ahead and get started. Utkarsh and Stefan, thank you for coming, and Sergio, you as well. We have gone over this with a few others, so I'm glad you guys could show up and give your input. Today is our last day for doing input on this particular document, so I'm just going to walk through it. So what we're doing is creating a governance board, and a governance board is important if we ever wanted to be more than an incubating project. You have to have a governance board and have had some history for it in order to be considered a graduated project. We have a long way to go, but this is one of the pieces that we should just go ahead and get started with. So Garima worked very hard on putting this document together. I then did some tweaks to it and added some additional information to it. So I'm just going to go quickly, through the process here. Who we are. This is not terribly different from what we've been talking about. I have tweaked the messaging around what Ortelius does. I used to say microservice architecture. But really what we're talking about is simplifying the development of microservice applications, trying to move away from people thinking that we're doing something to manage a cluster. We all know that we have our philosophy. This breaks it down a little more. It talks about how we are pushing diversity. It also talks about how we try to structure the project so everybody has somewhat of a bounded context and allows them to stay in their own swim lane so they can work efficiently and not feel like they're holding anybody back. Talks a little bit about, we do have a lot of old code out there, so we wanted to encourage anybody to take on that old code and not feel that they are disrespecting anybody from the past. So we make that a clear statement in this the bylaws. And then we talk about the real purpose of the governance board, that it brings what we termed as various perspectives. Siddharth introduced me to a woman who works for Red Hat today. She's considering running for the governance board, and anybody can run for the governance board. You don't have to be a committer. Anybody can be part of the governance board. That's, I could think, might be different. There may be other open source projects that require you to be doing some kind of pull request, but governance boards members are very different from programmers sometimes, so you don't have to be a committer. And their purpose is to keep track of the needs of the users and committers, and to keep track of how the market's changing and what potential commercial needs are for products like Ortelius. We're going to obviously continue our push for diversity and inclusion, for women and minorities to be part of the governance board. The governance board reflect the will of the participants instead of being self-appointed. And that's, sort of Steve and I have been the governance board up to now, and that is kind of a self-appointed. So we want to move away from that. And to maintain stability and avoid any kind of sudden changes in direction. That is something that the governance board will be focused on. The way the governance board will be set up, we're following the Jenkins process. Steve Taylor will have a permanent seat on the governance board until he decides to step down. Kosuke is that plays that role for Jenkins. Then there will be 6 board members. So we'll always have an odd number so that we have tiebreaker. And everybody will serve a 2-year term, except for 3 members who are initially elected to serve a 1-year term. And the reason why we're doing that is so that we have in 1 year, we'll have another election. So what we want to do is create an election once a year where 3 new members are rotating into the board, or at least we have the option of rotating new members to the board. No single company will have more than 50% of will make up more than 50% of the board, and we'll just follow standard Robert's Rules of Order for running the board, and the board should meet once a quarter or 4 times per year. There will be 2 officers defined that has to be elected. One's going to be the chair, and the other's the secretary. The board chair will call the meeting to order and manage the agenda. The secretary will be responsible for recording the minutes. And these officer positions are for a one-year term, and the board elects them at the beginning of each session. So we'll have the elections in December. So the board officers will be elected by the board in January, basically. They can come up with any types of officer roles. We have suggested 3: a security officer, a release officer, and someone to manage the product roadmap. There will be non-voting board attendees, and this will include the ambassador for the chair, for the champion chair, that Siddharth is serving in that role currently, and for the champion chair, and Steve Taylor is serving on that presently. We will have elections for both of those positions at the same time as the board. The purpose of having those two in the board meetings is to bring feedback in from the committers and the ambassadors. But they can vote, but they're non-binding votes. The board can also invite all of the TOC members to attend any of the board meetings, but these guest members will also not have a right to vote, but they can provide a non-binding vote to give their input. So basically, you have 7 people who are voting, and the rest are there as guests. The election process will be done via the CODERSIT, and I'm going to show everybody that in a minute. Anyone can be nominated to the board. Again, they don't have to be a committer. They don't even have to be an ambassador. And let's say, for example, we wanted to get, I'm going to see if Brian Dawson, who now is at the Linux Foundation, if he would consider being on our board. People like that would be a really, really great to be on our board, because they have insight in what other open source projects at the Linux Foundation are doing, and they can bring that information to the board level. We will do some kind of an opt-out when we go to do votes, because and I think that CODERSIT now has an opt-in. So you'll get an email and it says you can opt in for that email, but we'll make sure that we're not sharing emails with a voting service that we shouldn't be doing. And that is about it. We're trying to keep it clean and simple. This has been out there now for about a month. There's been some tweaks to it, but not much. And this is the final document. And if there are no objections, we will call this a final document as of today. The way we will do nominations will simply be through email. We'll send out a notice to say, nominations will open on September 24th, I believe is the date. I don't have that deck, but we'll get the nominations open. And we'll start voting, I think, sometime in November, and then we'll have voting for a month, and we'll announce the winners in December. The internet service that we'll use is this CODERSIT, and that's the same one that the Jenkins folks uses. It's free. If I show you what one looks like, let me see if basically they're a poll. And the way it works is this is for the favorite Breaking Bad character. So all of the nominees will be listed, and everybody who is currently in the Google groups will have the ability to vote. That's the only people who can vote. You don't have to be in the Google groups to be nominated, but the people who can vote have to be part of the community. So for example, let's say Walter White is our favorite character. We would move Walter White to the top. And that ranking gets submitted, and whoever has the highest rankings, you'll have, let's say we had 10 names, the top 6 would be elected. And that's basically all that we have to do to pull this together. Oops, where's my doc? So the question for today is, does anybody have any changes in this document? And I can leave this, we can keep this open for another couple of weeks, since we do have some time. The 24th is when the nominations begin, but we should have this document finalized before the 24th. So if you haven't had a chance to read it and you want to go ahead and make notes in it, go ahead and make comments in it, and then we'll pull it together.
I see that I feel it's very robust in the way that who's the people and how it's going to be selected. So I think it's very clear. Maybe in the statement about what we do or what is our goal, maybe can do a little tweak or something like that. But I think it's pretty much have everything. I don't know if this is based from other like governance document.
It is. We stole from Jenkins and the Eclipse Foundation.
Okay. Yeah, I was feeling like it's super like it has everything.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh, that's a very good starting point.
Yeah, we did do a little bit of work on what section? This one, how to get it started. Most of the boards have fewer than 7 members. They usually have 5. But what I have learned in being on a lot of these boards is that not everybody can attend all the meetings. So it's easier to get quorum for 7 than it is for 5.
Yeah, it's like for like floating points. Like
yeah.
For a base, for having ensure that you are going to have a baseline of people.
Yes.
Present.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And so it just makes it easier if somebody can't attend a board meeting, the board meeting can continue. And so that's why I went ahead and said, let's do 6 members and Steve as the permanent role. Jenkins has a permanent role for for keeping a constant, and Koske was who was selected to be that. So we copied that from Jenkins. I think Jenkins only has 5 members though, but we did 7.
Okay. I don't know. I'm pretty sure there is like 19 something percent to be ready. So.
Yeah, I think so too. If there's any ideas on suggested roles for the 7 members. So this makes it 5. In this case, we have 3 suggested officers and 2 permanent. So that's 5 officers out of a 7 board panel. So that's almost everybody having an officer position. But the board gets to make a decision on what these are. These are just suggestions. So if anybody has been on a board and they've had officer positions that they think that we should suggest, that would be the place to do it. And the board can be pretty flexible. So for example, they could, without adding to the board, they could say, we are going to create a product manager officer, but they're not going to be someone who's on the board. We're going to create that role for somebody in the community to take on. And then that person in the community would be invited to the board meetings, but they would have a non-binding vote. So we're trying to leave a lot of flexibility for the board to work in the way it needs to, but suggest some roles that the board might want to consider.
Yeah, about the roles, I don't know, this is just thinking loudly. For product management, I think is maybe a big responsibility for one people. Maybe can be like a complementary role for the product management, because something is about like the product management itself, what is like Ortelius itself is how it's growing, but there is this point of view about collecting what is like connecting Ortelius with the rest of the products in the open source space. So maybe that can be overwhelming for one people. So maybe we can like split product management officer in two roles. Like that's an idea, maybe.
Let's just write it down there. I'll say officer roles can be shared between multiple individuals
Yeah,
and
yeah,
called
yeah, if it's needed.
co-officers.
Yeah, something like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And that should be the same even for the, let's note that too. Committee chairs can be managed as co-chairs. So for example, the Linux Foundation has a outreach committee, and they have co-chairs for that outreach committee. So I just added that for both. So we can have co-chairs and co-officers.
That sounds cool.
Committee chairs can be managed as co-chairs if required. Okay, I think that's about it then, guys. We are ready to get ourselves back up and running. I think I'll send out an email to remind everybody when our first back to work open the general community meeting is. I think that's the 7th of September. And we'll start bugging everybody for nominations then. And I have shared this out to everyone, so everybody should have had a chance to read it if they're concerned about it. But thank you, Sergio, for those tweaks. I think it's good to note that co-chairs and co-officers are a reality. Anybody else have any thoughts? If you do, just come out to this document and go ahead and make the updates, or just add comments, and then we'll address the comments. Well, okay, then we'll give you your 10 minutes of your day back. And I thank you all for showing up and taking a look at this document. I think we have a document that is ready to go.
Yeah, thank you for all the work of the people who prepared this, because it's pretty strong and pretty ready. So
yeah, Garima did a lot of
that.
this. Yeah, so
Okay,
we'll give Garima. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cheers for I will. Maybe we can do. Remember that time I said maybe we can do a like little step about contributing thing.
Yeah.
I'm doing some projects, some Ajax projects, a scoreboard with with some unicorns and stuff like that. So it's fun to.
Like, oh, that would be awesome.
For someone is just doing a lot of stuff day to day, and maybe not wait to have a badge for that.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do with this is when we know it's good, I'm gonna convert it into Markdown, and it'll be part of the website.
Cool.
And I'll be sure to note the people who contributed to it.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great weekend, and thanks again for attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.